So what we will be doing throughout this module is we will be developing an understanding of proper and improper educator-student relationships and the life-changing impact they have on students. We will discuss strategies to avoid a boundary violation. We will know and understand educators and student boundaries, and we will identify acceptable and unacceptable behaviors when developing a relationship with students. The professional boundaries. The educator-student relationship is not equal. The educator is the professional and the adult. Set boundaries and know your limits. Boundary violations with students. Emotional, which is playing favorites with certain students, showing preferential treatment. Relationship, which is forming intimate relationships, romantic relationships, meeting students alone outside of school. And communication, which is providing advice on personal matters and using social media to communicate romantically or sexually with students. And I know a lot of the times we do want to help our students, and I know at Jackson we are very aware of what we can do and cannot do, but just keep that in mind. Unintentional violations, these are types of boundary violations. Some educator-student relationships may initially be appropriate and well-intentioned, but at some point they can shift to serving the needs of the student, of the teacher, and not the needs of the students. And then there's intentional violations where some teachers intentionally groom a student for the purpose of engaging in romantic or sexual misconduct. So the grooming process, there's different phases. Phase 1 is where you pick a specific student. Phase 2 is engaging with the student in student-like behaviors. Phase 3, desensitizing the student to touch, such as on the arms, shoulders, hair, or legs. For example, if Cynthia's my student, it could be as simple as just like an everyday thing, like just soft touches. And you can gauge it because, I mean, it's okay to like, oh, good job, but not like, oh, good job. So it's different. Phase 4 is isolating the student, and phase 5 is making the student feel responsible. Maintaining professional boundaries. No significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. Professional boundaries can be maintained by making them transparent, approved, and timely. Build a supportive relationship by being a teacher and not a friend. And educators, we listen, we guide, we praise, we respect, correct, honor, discipline, and teach effectively. Educator expectations. Don't have one-to-one meetings behind closed doors or personal social media exchanges. Don't have meetings with your students away from school, and don't exchange personal gifts. Like I said also, like if it's a whole group, I would say that would be okay. Don't do it like specifically where you're just targeting one specific child. Do respect, discipline, and honor your students. Don't have physical contact with your students. Do correct and teach your students, and do keep appropriate boundary space between you and your students. Okay, so we're gonna do, it's like a short activity where you'll discuss, Mrs. T is a 4th grade teacher. On this day, Mrs. T decided to stay late working in her classroom. As she leaves the campus, she notices she is the last teacher to leave the campus. She also notices one of her male students sitting on a bench, and he appears to be crying. She approaches him, and the student tells her he is having a lot of problems at home. He asks Mrs. T for a ride to his grandmother's house because he does not want to go home. If his grandmother happens not to be home, he wants Mrs. T to take him to her house because he wishes his mother was more like Mrs. T. If you were Mrs. T, how would you handle the situation in avoiding an escalation and violation of educator and student boundaries? Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes if you just want to discuss really quick with your groups what you would do in a situation like this, and then I'll randomly or have Cynthia randomly pick. like to volunteer here and answer? Yes, Ms. Wiseman.
I would contact administration and campus police and turn the situation over to them.
So she would contact administration and campus police. Who agrees that that's a good choice?
That's a good choice.
Very good choice. Take the responsibility off of yourself as a teacher and give it to those who should have that responsibility. Very good job, Ms. Wiseman. Okay, and the second small discussion that you're going to be having in your group is Mrs. Z is a popular secondary teacher. Mr. Z, I'm sorry, is a popular secondary teacher. He often jogs at a park after school and on weekends. While stretching for a long run, he notices one of his female students approaching him. As she nears, he notices she has been crying. She tells Mr. Z that she is having a lot of personal problems at home and with her boyfriend. She asks Mr. Z if they can sit at a nearby bench so she can tell him all her problems and get his advice. She also tells Mr. Z that she will need a ride home. If you were Mr. Z, how would you handle this situation in avoiding an escalation and violation of educator-student boundaries? Okay, if you want to go ahead and discuss briefly with your group. Would anybody like to volunteer for what they've been discussing at your table?
Yes, I would say, I'm off of work. I don't interview right now. Whatever school you go to.
Well, this is your student, and she. Because remember, as an educator, you are an educator wherever you go. You're representing the district, so you're not just representing yourself at that moment.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Galindo?
What I've usually seen is that people can come up with an excuse and say, oh my goodness, I have a doctor's appointment, but you know what, my school has, you know that our school has a counselor. On Monday, you can go talk to her. Okay? But always have like an excuse, okay, I have a doctor's appointment, oh my gosh, I need to go and get my babysitter or something, I don't know.
Yeah, make up an excuse. That's a really good idea. And like she said, you can always tell her that we do have a counselor and email your counselor over the weekend and try to set up an appointment where your counselor can talk to that student. And in reference to the wanting the ride home, would it be pretty much the same thing that Ms. Wiseman said?
Yes.
Notify an administrator? Or maybe like
I'm sorry. I can't.
anonymously call their parents if they want to do it? Okay, we're going to move on to the quiz portion of it. So this one, it's going to be a true or false question. Or not so much a true or false, it's ABCD. Which statement is not true? Okay, well, A should be, when interacting with students, teachers must always use good judgment.
The statement never showed.
I know it's not, it's showing on my little one, but it's not showing on the big one. So A is, which statement is not true? A, when interacting with students, teachers must always use good judgment. B, in a student's life, not many people yield more power than a teacher. C, teachers should be encouraged to connect on a personal level to help students succeed academically. And D, sometimes the lines between a teacher and a student can become invisible. So if you want to discuss with your group and then hold up your little answer choice. I know this one's a little bit difficult because you can't really see it.
It's not true.
So which one is not true? I'm going to read them again. A, when interacting with students, teachers must always use good judgment. B, in a student's life, not many people yield more power than a teacher. C, teachers should be encouraged to connect on a personal level to help students succeed academically. And D, sometimes the lines between a teacher and a student can become invisible. You want to hold up your paddles? Okay, very good job. I saw a lot of C's. The correct answer is C, because the word that we're looking at in C is personal. Teachers should be encouraged to connect on a personal level. We always have to keep that separated, personal and professional. We are always the professional in any situation that we are involved in. Question 2. All of the following are examples of types of boundary violations except A, I don't know, it always happens. He's the professional, the tech person. I see it on my screen. Okay, so A, emotional, B, relationship, C, communication, D, all three are boundary violations. So the one that you cannot see here is emotional. So all of the following are examples of types of boundary violations except A, emotional, B, relationship, C, communication, or D. All three are boundary violations.
I would say emotional, but relationship and communication, it really depends on what relationship and what type of communication. So emotional is definitely, I would say, a violation. Boundary violation, but relationship and really.
It's more specific.
All three are.
Because remember when we discussed it, it had different ones. All of them can vary depending on the situation. So keep that in mind. All of them can vary depending on the situation. It is all three. All three are boundary violations. Again, it's the way it is perceived. Like I could be very nice to Cynthia, or I could be very nice to Cynthia. Like it's all the way that it's perceived. So all three are types of boundary violations: emotional, relationship, and communication. As a professional, we should know how to separate, not so much separate the two, but find the difference within each violation and be the professional in each situation that we are involved in. Number 3, engaging in a romantic and/or sexual relationship with a student, current or former, is an example of violating an A, communication boundary, B, power boundary, C, relationship boundary, or D, emotional boundary. Engaging in a romantic and/or sexual relationship with a student. Go ahead and put your little answer choices. I'm going to give you a hint. The word is in your question. The answer is in your question. The correct answer is C. It is a relationship boundary. I know I hear a lot of people saying a power boundary. It all depends on how you use it, but the question says a romantic and or sexual relationship. A power could be like when you have control of a student and you try to force them to do stuff because you're in charge and where you're using your power to your advantage. But because it does specify that it is a romantic and or sexual relationship, and it does say current or former. So if they're no longer your student, some of that power from the power boundary does go away. So it's that relationship boundary that you would be crossing. Question 4. When maintaining personal boundaries, teachers should A, make it transparent, B, make it approved, C, make it timely, or D, all of the above. Timely means quick.
Very quick.
Yes, the correct answer is all of the above. You want to make it transparent. You don't want anything behind hidden doors. You want to make it approved. You don't want anything that is in violation of any of our that goes against our Texas Education Code, that breaks any violation, anything that we have, like any of our guidelines, anything like that, and make it timely. When it comes to personal boundaries, again, good job. You don't want to groom. So that's what it means when it says make it timely. Make it quick. Don't spend too much time. So yes, the correct answer is all of the above. Question 5. Teachers should implement all of the following practices except A, no meetings with students behind closed doors. B, no exchanging personal gifts with students. C, no praising students. Or D, no frequent touching of students. Again, the question is teachers should implement all of the following practices except A, B, C, or D. Let me see your little card, or if you want to hold up a sign. Remember, the question says except. 3 of them are things that are okay to do. 1 of them is not okay to do.
I think.
Look for key words.
I think.
Teachers should implement all of the following practices except no meeting with students behind closed doors, no exchanging personal gifts with students, no praising students, or no frequent touching. The correct answer is, because I saw a lot of mixed answers. The correct answer is C. So it's pretty much negative, negative, positive, negative. You don't want to constantly touch him. So it says no, because I saw a lot of D's. No frequent touching is where you're going and doing it over and over. And it says no frequent touching. So it's telling you don't do that. So that is why that is not the correct answer. No praising students. You want to build the classroom culture and the classroom community, strengthen your classroom community. So praising students, whether it's inside or outside of your classroom, that's always a good thing. That is something that you do want to implement or want to do. So no is where that becomes a correct choice. Because you do want to praise your students.
Should implement, so you're implementing the no meeting, no exchanging, and no frequent touches.
Exactly. Yes.
That's how you see it.
So no praising students. You do want to do that. Question 6, true or false? One way to maintain professional relationships with students is to avoid putting yourself in a position where you have to defend, explain, or justify your behavior or actions. True or false? One way to maintain professional relationships with students is to avoid putting yourself in a position where you have to defend, explain, or justify your behavior or actions. That answer is true. You don't want to have to defend your behavior later. Just like one of the earlier questions said, be transparent. Don't do anything where you have to think of excuses or find reasons to defend yourself from getting into trouble. Question 7. All of the following are recommended guidelines that were discussed in the training except A. Use verbal praise and reinforcement, not physical contact. B. Do not attend extracurricular events where your students are participating. C. Do not meet with students alone behind a locked door. Or D. Maintain a professional barrier between you and your students. You are the adult, the teacher, and the professional. Act like the expert at all times. So all of the following are recommended guidelines that were discussed except very good job, Kinder. The correct answer is B. Do not attend extracurricular events where your students are participating. That was not discussed. That was the end of Module 1. If you would like to get up, stretch for a minute or two, and we're going to move on to Module 2.